Hello, and welcome to the panel, where we take a look at graphic novels and talk about their story, art, and everything in between. It's spooky season, so why not celebrate all things scary, starting with Soichi by the Japanese king of horror manga, Junji Ito. So grab a blanket to hide under if you get a little too scared, and let's jump into dissecting this manga. It's good to see everyone again. If you can't tell, I'm in a hotel room in Malta right now. So you got me live from Malta. But also joining me today from Previews World, we have consumer marketing digital content editor Troy Jeffrey Allen.
I am a marketing manager now. Thank you very much.
Look at you. Okay.
That's okay. That's okay. I'll get you for this. I will show you true horror.
All right. Well, now I've got that locked in now. And then also joining us, we have the queen of Free Comic Book Day, Ashton Greenwood.
What's up, guys? Hey, howdy, hey. I am the Duchess of Free Comic Book Day, but if you wanted to upgrade me to queen, I'm not going to argue.
I'm just going to upgrade you, and apparently I downgraded Troy. I don't know. It's been too long, y'all.
It's okay. I was about to say, we got the band back together. This is
right. Yeah. How's everyone doing?
From different parts of the world. Doing okay. Doing good.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I'm doing great. I love spooky season, so I've been having a great time. And this book was like the perfect read for this time of year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. This was genuinely creepy.
Mm-hmm. Like put me in the mood. Upsetting, I would say.
Well, let's go ahead and kind of start getting into the show. Let's give you a summary. Let's give everyone a summary of the plot for Soichi. So Soichi is a really creepy kid, like super creepy. He hangs out alone, creating weird dolls that he likes to puncture with nails, setting off curses affecting everyone around him. Not to mention shooting nails out of his mouth. Like everything is just wrong with this kid. But through a number of related manga stories, we get a look into the horrifying life of living with a kid that talks to the dead. So did either of you already know Junji Ito before, or was this kind of like new author for you?
I feel like if you're a comic book fan, you just like know of Junji Ito, even if you've never read any of his stuff. Like there's kind of no way around at least knowing who he is. So definitely was familiar with his name, and also Viz has put a number of his books in Free Comic Book Day and Halloween Comic Fest over the years. So I've gotten like tastes of it, but I've never read an entire book of his, like an entire piece of work. So this was my first time dipping into like the Junji Ito verse in like a to its fullest capacity. It was great. Like I said, it was scary, upsetting, unsettling. And kind of like my initial thought going into it was, for me, like little kids are super creepy because I was traumatized by The Ring as a child, which I think I've mentioned on one of our shows before. Yes, so my immediate first thought was like, this has too much like Ring vibes for me to come out of this unscathed.
Mm-hmm. That's hilarious.
What about you, Troy?
I was about to say, I can attest that Ashton's not joking about The Ring because she has mentioned it multiple times in the past. I can think of at least 2 other times you've mentioned it before. No, yeah, this is definitely the first thing I've ever read by Junji Ito. I kind of have this thing where when something comes highly recommended to me, I'm a little hesitant, and so it kind of takes me a while to get around to it. And I think it's just because I don't want to be disappointed. And I was relieved that this lived up to its expectations. We can get into that later, but yeah, like they call him the master of horror, and it only took a few pages before I realized, like, oh, okay, yeah, this is actually well earned. That title is well earned.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've read some of his past works, and they just stick with you. And then reading this one, I was just like going into it, I'm like, this is gonna mess me up. So you know what? Let's get everyone messed up a little bit. So let's start digging into this graphic novel by talking about the story. So, for those of you that don't know Junji Ito, he is the writer and the mangaka behind Tomoe, Uzumaki, Geo, and there are so many creepy short stories and short story compilations that he's done where he talks about both cosmic horror and kind of body horror, combining the two concepts in most of his works. And he's also adapted Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, for which he won an Eisner Award for, and even had a cameo in Death Stranding.
Oh, really? Okay,
Yeah.
I didn't know that. Right next to
Yeah.
Kojima. That's kind of crazy. Okay.
So, what were your thoughts on this story? Just starting off in the beginning, meeting the characters. What were your thoughts?
You want to go first, Ashton?
Yeah, sure. So, first things first, like with Soichi, I loved him in like a really creepy, compelling kind of way, because reading this book, not once, the entire time I was reading this, did I accurately predict what he was going to do next. Like, he'd be like, yeah, he's got to do this weird thing. Nope, goes left with it. So I loved him because he always kept you guessing and on your toes. And he did so many things where I was like, literally was like taken aback by it, reading it. And I also really liked Machina for the exact opposite reason, which is like, he could not get under her skin no matter what he did. Like, she was kind of like his counterpart, which I thought was really compelling and really important. Otherwise, he's just like running roughshod over everybody, that he would be the point and she would be the counterpoint. I thought was really interesting and kept me kind of like invested in their story, because she keeps coming back as like a through line character. And one of the last things I want to point out that I thought was super, super interesting was, even though Soichi's a mega weirdo and creepy and doing witchcraft and like causing torment and turmoil for everybody around him, nobody gives up on him, which I thought was interesting. Like, nobody, like in his family, writes him off. Like, Koichi's just like, yeah, that's my brother. He's a weirdo. His cousins are just like, he's up to his old tricks. And his mom's like, do you want shaved ice? And the teacher's like, I'm going to save you. And like every step of the way, he undermines them, but they're never like, this kid's a lost cause. So I appreciated that like undertone of love, even though there's all these overtones of horror.
I didn't think about that.
Yeah, I didn't think about that either. Yeah, I like maybe I was like, it might have been just that I was so invested that I couldn't like remove myself from it, be like, okay, there's still hope for this kid. Like, I spent a lot of the time reading this, and forgive my language, but like I spent a lot of time reading, I was like, this kid's like such a little shit. like, like the whole time. But it's really entertaining. I like how low stakes it all seems on the surface, about how personal Soichi like makes everything. And because of that, it raises the stakes. You know what I mean? Because a lot of the stories are kind of like not just self-contained in the narrative, but also self-contained in where like the actual locations, right? So it never seems like epic and larger than life, which is actually nice to get back to after reading probably too many superhero comics lately. But yeah, like he makes everything so personal, and it just kind of makes everything like elevated, and also helps that his targets are other kids. And when you're a kid, everything seems bigger than you, right?
Yeah,
so
that's a
being
point.
right, so being stalked and manipulated by this little feels so violating, like, you know what I mean? And yeah, I really appreciated that. I thought that was it was an interesting, it's kind of especially I think now, just entertainment event in general. Any entertainment that's not like just a straight drama, like the stakes are so vast, and this was like very laser focused and very personal, and that definitely resonated with me as I was reading it. I was like, this is just terror, like that's all it is. And it's kind of like this playful terror that he's like executing against people, particularly Machina or Machina, or however you say it, sorry. But yeah, like the personal aspect of it really resonated. So
yeah, it was definitely like the creepy family kid. Like, what do you do with it? It kept reminding me of The Good Son with Macaulay Culkin.
Yes.
With the evil kid, and I'm just like, y'all just need to make him go away. See, Ashton's like, oh, they're so nice and they love him. I'm just like, they need to just get rid of this kid.
Just like get him out of here.
Send him away.
Ashton's the person who dies first in the horror movie. Yeah, that's what's going on.
You know what? It is what it is.
But like on that note, what would you do if this was like your brother or sister or your kid? Like what, Troy, what would you do?
Oh, geez. I mean, I don't. I'm not gonna say what I would do. I like because I feel like I like I don't know. There's look, I was raised in a certain era, so like when you start acting out, you
Oh.
usually got your butt whooped. Like that's really what it boiled down to. And you can argue about how effective it was, but yeah, like there was a few times where I was like, God, the parents are so passive. Like,
Right.
yeah, I was just like, dude, come on. Like enough is enough. Clearly this kid is a terrorist. Like, come on. So yeah. That probably would have been my resolution after a while.
Yeah. Yeah. What about you, Ashton?
For all of my like the undertones of love and being unconditional, like I would be as far away from that person as I could physically possibly get myself. I don't want no parts of it. Don't talk to
Mm,
me. I'm not talking to him.
mhm.
Like I'm not involved because I very much got the impression with Soichi that like as soon as you interacted, like done, you were done for.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
because
yeah.
he's looking for a reaction, and if you don't get, like, you
Hmm.
don't give him what he wants, like, it just amplifies the outcome. So, I am not engaging.
Can I ask you guys a question? So when I was reading, so the each story is like its own little like story, right? It's all
Mhm.
each story is kind of self-contained, its own little short. And so knowing the book said Soichi on the cover, right? I read the first issue, and as I'm reading the first short story, and as I'm reading the first short story, I'm sitting there, I'm like, man, this kid is like awful. Like, this kid is a problem, right? And then we
Mhm.
switch over to the next story, and the next story takes you away from their home, right? It starts off like away from the house of the family that Soichi is part
Mhm.
of, right? And so while I'm reading it, and then while I'm reading it, one of the characters, and I don't want to give away too much away, but like one of the characters is like walking home, and then like something happens, and then she ends up in Soichi's house, right? And
Mhm.
I had a moment when I realized she was back in Soichi's house. Like, oh, come on, really? This kid again? And like, I mean, the kid's name is on the book, but like
Right.
they did like Ito did such an effective job of making me like not anticipate what would happen next, but also
Mhm.
to not want someone to run afoul of this child. Like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? That like my reaction was like, oh, come on, this kid again. So I just thought that was really impressive. I don't know if anybody else had that reaction reading the book.
I did, but not during that wood scene. I had it with the teacher, Mr. Yanagita, where
Mm,
like he's like coming back every day and is like
mhm,
determined. And I'm like, why? Like literally
mhm.
like this kid again. Like, why would you invite yourself into that?
Right.
You have that like that I must save this child. I am the Superman of teachers kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was
Yeah.
not going to work with him.
Mm-mm. Mm-mm.
So, which one of the short stories was your guys' favorite,
Hmm.
Ashton?
I need to remember which ones they're called.
Yeah, I don't remember the names. That's the only catch.
Oh, mine was Soichi's Happy Diary
Mm,
because it was the first kind of taste you get of his weak points and him as a human.
mm,
Because
mhm,
up until that point, he is literally just like a terrorist and running
mhm.
amok and like causing all these problems. And it doesn't seem like you can really do anything to stop him, and that there's not really anything he cares about, and there's no stakes for him. And that's the first look you get at his more human side and his crush on his classmate, and the way
Yeah.
Machina can use that to undermine him kind of
Mhm,
brought him back down a little bit and made him like just a kid again.
mhm. Actually, you know what? I would go with that actually. Like, and I also like that they kind of set that up in one of the previous stories where
Mhm.
like Machina finds like a note he wrote to this girl. I thought that
Yeah.
was kind of interesting. Yeah. So I would probably go with that. I thought that was up until that point, I did think the kid was completely irredeemable. And I mean, by the end of it, he's still not really redeemable. But
No.
at the same time, you know what I mean? But at the same time, you're sort of like, okay, like I guess he has human flaws in some way, shape, or
Mhm.
form.
There's a bit of humanity. He has a crush on someone, right?
Yeah,
Right.
right?
Yeah. 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 But that also puts you on edge, right? Because you're sort of like, oh God, what's going to happen if this girl says no? Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
So
right?
yeah.
Like
Hmm.
all the
I also
horrible.
had like sorry, go ahead, Mia.
No, go ahead.
I also had like a super judgmental moment, and maybe this was like a trap I was supposed to fall into, where I was
I
like,
know what you're about to say.
this girl he has a crush on, like she's gonna be a weirdo, like she's gonna show up and be like his equal, and then she's like the cutest, like most regular thing, and I was like, oh, this is bad because she's gonna know parts of him.
Right,
Oh
yeah.
yeah.
No, I had the same thought too. I was like, I mean, I kind of figured she was going to be super cutesy because this was a manga. Like, I got to be honest with you, but
Yeah.
like when she showed up, I was like, oh no, this is not good. Oh, yeah,
You could definitely tell she was like the popular girl, and you're like, oh, this is way out of your league.
yeah, it's way out, like the definition of out of your league, right?
Yeah.
Now, Junji Ito has this way of like just having moments that stick with you, whether it's the art or the story. Was there a moment that you're just like, I will never forget this, and this is so messed up? And
I'll go first. I got this one. I literally like post-it noted my book because I was like, I have things I want to come back to. And the blue post-it notes are like the most unforgettable parts. I only have 2 of them. And the first one was during the forest story when the girl wakes up and she's got the bite marks of the nails in her neck.
Yeah,
I was like, I literally was like, oh, like I gasped. That got me. And it was so gross. And then he talks about eating the shaved ice with blood. And I was like, I know he didn't. I know he didn't put blood in that shaved ice. Like it literally got under my skin. And then the other one was with all of the like fake cloth dolls when the kid pulls like the piece of wood out of the fire to kill the female teacher, and then later there's like this guy sitting by the fire just like completely not even involved in this massive fight that's going on, and then later they're like, oh, that was the other teacher, he just was like sitting there doing nothing because he had no soul. I was like, that was him this whole time.
Yeah. No, I mean, like again, like that's another element of just how like everything seems big to you as a kid. So there's also moments where I'm like, is this real or, you know what I mean? But I also kind of had these also like the thing that came to mind was, yes, the nail holes in her neck, right? But then also the tentacles that like grew that were the same as the ones that punctured the nails that punctured Soichi's face. That definitely stuck out, and I remember kind of being at the end, and it was like, is that real? Like, you know what I mean? I was like, did that actually happen? But then I'm like, well, I guess I was like, well, we're in this weird hyper realistic reality. So I guess it doesn't really matter, and it all works. Yeah, I think, the one thing that also stood out to me, I don't even necessarily think it was, I guess it was kind of like a little bit of a horror element, was the doll, like you mentioned earlier, Ashton, the straw doll. And sometimes sometimes I was about to say manga, sometimes manga can be, forgive me for saying, like actually it's so specific to Japanese culture, which is understandable, right? But when you're reading that as an outsider, as an American, certain details don't register, right?
Yeah.
And it literally takes, and we've done this on the panel a few times when we talked about manga, and someone who knew more about Japanese culture was like, oh no, that's actually a Japanese thing, and that's why. You know what I mean? But the doll thing resonated with me, and I'm not sure a lot of people would pick up on why. I forget the girl's name. Is it Makina? Yeah, it is Makina. Why she was so scared of someone saying that she nailed the doll to the tree. And like, and it's really because there's shame behind that, right? And culturally, I also kind of got that. You know what I mean? Like it's a doll being sort of like an effigy almost, and that's gotta that and then the last thing she wants is people to go back, is for him to go back to anybody, either back in the city or even in the house, and be like, she nailed this doll to this thing, and she's considered like cursed or a witch or something like that. You know what I mean? Like that was one of those things where it's like, okay, culturally, I understand what this is. So that kind of really, again, resonated with me in a way that I didn't expect.
That's an interesting point. I didn't even think about it. That is really interesting. Yeah. But I mean, speaking of the nail thing, that was mine. Like when he gets the nails through his cheeks, and I'm just like, oh no, like what's he gonna do in retaliation? I was just waiting for like something horrible to happen to her. And then he was just like, it's okay, I'll get you back later.
Right.
Which in and of itself is horrifying, though, like it not being an immediate response, and then you're just like waiting and waiting and waiting for what it's going to be. Oh,
Yeah, no, he had this like great way of just kind of like slowly weeding out the torture and like bringing it out of people.
Hmm.
Ugh.
And you know, it's actually great too because like it's kind of the most logical conclusion. Like, okay, this kid's running around with nails in his mouth.
Yeah,
Like
right.
at some point you think he would cut himself. So then the very first story is like, oh yeah, he did. Okay.
Okay, first off, someone needed to take the nails away from him.
Yes.
Okay,
Right.
like
Also.
where is he
Also.
getting these nails? Is he pulling
Right.
them out of the attic?
Right.
Right.
That's
Yeah.
another instance of like the family being super complicit too, because they're just like, oh, he sucks on nails. Like that's just a thing he does. Like, what do you what? Like
Right.
take them out of his mouth. He's in the 5th grade.
Right. Right.
Yeah, no, these images that he creates with the story. It's just incredibly
Mhm.
creepy. And then when you mix that with like his artistic style, with his like black and white art, it becomes
Yeah.
even creepier. So actually, let's kind of transition into that so we can kind of bring the two together, because I think you
Mhm.
really need to with him. And let's start talking a little bit about the art as well. So Junji Ito has two artistic registers. There's kind of like the normal everyday life, and then you have the horrific. And it seems like the juxtaposition of the two styles is what gives his work that really unsettling visual power, because it's like bringing really creepy stuff into the real world. And his black and white illustrations have become some of the single most terrifying images that are even horrifying without having any story behind them. So, what were your impressions of this art in correlation with the story, Troy?
I mean, no, the art is definitely more my pace. Like you know, because I've never read Junji Ito. That's one of the reasons why I kind of go like, okay, I don't read manga, right? And that's me gatekeeping myself, I think, almost. Although clearly I've recommended manga. There's definitely manga behind me, like you know what I mean. I have read manga, but I feel like I have barely scratched the surface in terms of what's available. And a lot of times, uh, the artwork is kind of sometimes what kind of makes me step away from it. And I've noticed consistently that the books that have always appealed to me have sort of like a hyper realistic style. And that's what I get from Junji Ito, where it's sort of like, okay, it's reality, but it's not, you know. And I see that in other books. Like I'm Ashton, I'm going to mention Prison School for a second. I mentioned prison. You know, I get that in Prison School. I get that in books like Battle Royale, where it's like, yeah, that's like there's a lot of detail and attention paid to the backdrop, so you feel like you're in the real world, right? But there's something about, and even some of the faces too, but there's still something about the faces of these characters, you know, and it's a very manga style, you know, but there's still something about the faces of these characters that just kind of removes you from reality just enough that everything becomes more unpredictable. And like I find that really fascinating about artists like Junji Ito, and I'm starting to realize that that's a pattern in the type of artwork that I like from manga.
What about you, Ashton?
Yeah, I think you make a great point. First of all, Troy, about the faces being real, but at the same time holding their kind of like manga like theme. Anamia, you said the number one thing that I kind of took away from the art, which is the fact that it's in black and white, feels really critical to the story, because it adds, like you said, that extra layer of it being creepy and feeling like inaccessible and otherworldly, because it's not in Technicolor. It doesn't feel like it's our world, and it kind of sets it apart, in addition to it having all of the sort of like voodoo and witchcraft undertones of him being a mega weirdo.
Yeah, no, I feel like if they had added any kind of color to this, you wouldn't get that same, even if it was like color that correlated with, you know, the feel of the scene. I don't think it would have that same impact that his like black and white, just stark, creepy images that he makes.
I also think he did a really good job of capturing the motion. specifically of Soichi of two main things: the spitting of the nails, and showing how quickly they're moving. And that literally this panel is what I was thinking of, that they can stick into walls or stick into people's body parts, arms and faces and all of that. So giving you an idea of like the speed, and that made it feel more sinister. And then also all of the running, like, which was something I meant to mention earlier, is like Soichi's whole thing is like, this didn't go the way I wanted to. I'm out of here.
Yeah. So true.
They did a good job of capturing like all of the different sounds of his like laughter as he leaves the scene and is running away, and all the different sounds of him like clambering to get away. I thought were really accurately captured in the panels as well. It gave you a sense of the dynamicism of the scenes.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's like it's playful and deranged at the same time, right?
100% accurate. Like that is the perfect sum up.
Yeah. Like it's like he's kind of impish, right? Which is more terrifying for me when like there's like a delight in the horror from the assailant. Like that's the type of stuff that like actually does get me. Like, you know, the Michael Myers and Jason where they're just trotting around and they just like slam somebody in a sleeping bag up against a tree. It's amusing, but like when you see the giddiness in it, it's just sort of like, oh God. Like what are we dealing with here? Right.
Was there like a particular moment in the artwork where you were just like, this is it, I'm done. This is too much, too scary, too creepy?
You know, this is kind of a page turner for me. So I actually kind of felt myself being pulled forward by Ito. Like, you know what I mean? Like with each one, because I'm like, I didn't anticipate like some grand finale, but I sort of was like, well, what else is where's this going to go? Like, when is this? It was actually, you know, it was more or less, where's this going to go? And like, when is this going to stop? Like, you know what I mean? Like, I am fed up with this in a good way, But yeah, it was just sort of like, this is enough of this kid.
Enough of this kid. There was actually a scene for me that wasn't like, it wasn't like super crazy scary or like gory or horror or any of that. And that's actually what made it stick out to me so much. It comes really early on. It's in the first story when Soichi's sitting in the closet and he's talking to Machina and he's explaining to her why he sucks on the nails. And he's just got like one clawed hand coming out of the closet, like reaching towards her. That just was so creepy and got under my skin because it wasn't meant to be scary. Like it was a completely like regular thing. He's just sitting down, he's in the closet, which I'm sure is supposed to have like a creepy undertone, but of all of the things in the book that are meant to be scary, this wasn't one of them, and yet it was still really unsettling for me.
And also artistically, he's like, even when he's not in the shot, you feel that he's around.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And like, I mean, I guess that's also a story. That's also part of the story. I mean, it's all Ito, like, you know, but like, you definitely have these moments where you know, the other characters are engaging with each other and it's just like, well, where is he? Like, where is he right now? And the other characters also are like, well, what is he doing right now? You know? And then he finally shows up and you're kind of relieved, but you're kind of like, oh no. Like, I know where he is, but like, oh God, he's here. So yeah.
For me, Junji Ito always gets me with like the kind of claustrophobic feel that he'll do. So like whether it was him being in the closet or like, I know we didn't have to read till the end, but the quiet room that he created and the spaces in between. There have been others that he did. There was one comic or manga that he did where there's like a cliff wall, and people are finding human shaped cutouts in them, and then they're like, oh, this one matches me, it's for me, and then they walk into the wall, and I'm just like, what is with this claustrophobic stuff? But I think he like takes on fears, like with the spiders.
Yeah, and to your point of the claustrophobia, he definitely does that in the attic too, when he's turning the first teacher into the doll, and they're up in the attic, and then they come like clambering down head first, and it's just like really tight, and like the way that the panel is drawn, it's literally just enough space for Soichi and the teacher's doll, and it just feels like they're squeezed into that panel as it is. So it absolutely, I didn't even realize that he does play on that claustrophobia, but he does it a lot.
Yeah, like even go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, you just made me remember. There's a sequence where I think the brother is trying to chasing the Soichi through the house, but
Mhm.
even when he kind of falls through and it's interesting because like he falls through an opening, and you're kind of like discombobulated. You don't quite, as the character
Mhm.
is, you don't know where in the house he is at this point, and then he ends up falling into like sludge or mud or something like that. And
Mhm.
it's kind of the same idea, but it's like in this very narrow corridor. So even when the chase is over, there's still an element of claustrophobia, no matter what.
Yeah.
Like the walls are still closing in, which is kind of crazy.
Yeah, he just has this great way of playing with fears. I think for me, it was also like the things coming out of his cheeks.
Hmm.
It was very reminiscent. Like, what was that story that we always had like on Goosebumps, where it was like the pimple and then all the like spiders? Yeah, that
I
one.
know,
That's what
yeah.
it reminded me of, and I was like, no, it was so
Ew.
nasty. Oh my gosh. So were there any spots in this where you just felt like I'm trying to think of what I was about to say. Sorry, it's 10 o'clock right now.
Right.
Um, where I feel like he's always really good at matching the scenes with what's going on in the story and the art and kind of having that imagery. Were there any parts in the book that you just felt like this is the epitome of like matching the art to a scene and it just coming together as one just panel that
Mm.
just you don't even need the story for, let alone, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the last story we read, I thought what you just said about like not you don't even need the bubbles. The entire like closing scene of like Soichi's running to the school and Yanagita's chasing him to the school and other teacher is like trying to whip the students and then the other two students, the ones turning into a doll, and it's all happening concurrently and it's all speeding towards this like
Mm.
head-on collision of coming to some sort of weird conclusion because all of these do. And even though people are saying things and sounds are happening and like there's narration and dialogue, you don't even need any of it. Like you can completely skip all of the word bubbles and it still makes perfect sense. And there's still this like overarching feeling of dread and movement of what this is going to lead to. So I feel like that, yeah, like that panel upsetting.
Mhm. Yeah. Right. Right. I was actually I thought about the image of his head on a mosquito. Like I
Mm,
remember that. I remember that also kind of resonating, just sort of like again, just the unreality. Oh, but Riley's on it today. He's got all the panels. Um, yeah, but like the non-reality of it all, right? Yeah, just sort of just that element of I'm like flipping through it as I'm talking.
mhm,
Um, yeah, that element of is this real? Like, can he really curse
yeah.
people? Like, you know what I mean? Like, is he like is like he mentions King Tut and Osiris? I think Osiris at one point in time, and it's just
Mhm.
sort of like, is he really cursing people? Like, are we into like Plague of Locust territory? Like, what's going on here? So yeah, that was those visual elements just kind of make all the, and then every time and I noticed too when he curses people, like they give some visual representation for the curse that
Mhm.
he's referencing, right? So you got the mosquito, but you also got they also actually show I think it's Osiris. They actually show Osiris like while
Mhm.
he's talking to Machina and like telling her, "I'm going to curse you," and like he references King Tut at another point in time, and it's like, yeah, like with the mosquitoes, right? Yeah, so yeah, those visual elements just kind of again just enough to make you go like, "What world am I in? Am I?" Or it's just a lot of that throughout the
Mhm.
book, and I think that's a real skill.
I think for me, it was like when they go back into the school and you see the other kids who have no idea what's going on. Like at least they have kind of an understanding of what's going on, but then they see like the principal and the teacher as dolls, and
Mhm.
she's been set on fire. And
Yeah.
I'm kind of like wondering what these other kids have got to think of Soichi and what's been going on,
Hmm.
if they even know. And again, I just
Great point. Like, are they aware that he's like cursing people and creating problems, or are they just like, oh, that's the class weirdo? Like, don't talk
Yeah.
to him. Like, what is the level of it? Because he does seem to be very, very intentional with his targets.
Hmm.
mhm. Almost like a bull, like he's been bullied, right? And then he's
Hmm.
like,
Yeah.
but again, like you mentioned, I feel like everyone was kind of too nice to him,
Hmm.
right?
Not enough discipline.
No,
Right.
again, the good son, just off him.
Yes. Yeah. It's so funny you mentioned. Oh, well, I'll say this later because, like, you mentioned the good son, and I literally had my notes had the good son. Macaulay Culkin's with the good son. Yeah.
But I mean, that's exactly what it was. It's like every single point, I'm like, okay, why is he still here? Like, what are y'all thinking? Like,
You're right.
And to that point, like, and I thought about that a lot of times. I was like, I feel like there's a lot of like hard edge solutions for this. Like military school was the first thing that came to mind. And I almost felt like Junji Ito kind of anticipated that people would feel that way about Soichi because because then the teacher comes in and tries to do the whole like this kid needs more discipline, more regimen, more routine. Like I'm gonna be the one, I'll fix him. He just needs more routine. And then it completely backfires. So it almost felt like an anticipation of the thought process of like, just ship this kid off.
There is no saving this kid.
Right.
I mean, they say no child left behind, but every now and then you gotta leave a kid
one
behind. You gotta leave one behind. I'm just saying.
No, that's exactly right. This book was just absolutely terrifying. Overall, what was your guys' final thoughts on this? Like, how are we feeling overall now that we've finished this?
I mean, have you ever read or watched something, and even if it's older and you've never seen it before, or it's new and you're seeing it for the first time like everybody else, but have you ever watched or read something and gone, oh, this is actually iconic, like it actually will have impact or had impact, and that's what this is. Like I feel like that's what the situation is with Soichi. Like like you said, like I don't know exactly when the book came out, but like I could imagine that maybe the good son inadvertently is inspired by this. Like, you know what I mean? I could imagine like Children of the Corn is inadvertently inspired by this. Like, and yeah, I just, again, like when I've never read Ito before. I've been hearing about Ito for years and years. People have been telling me to read his stuff. And now that I've actually read something by him, I'm like, I get it. I totally understand it. Like it's there's an iconography in the terror elements and the horror elements of this story, and you get why he's a master at it. Like the same way Hitchcock is a master. Like, you know what I mean? Like I read this book and it immediately makes me think of the shower scene in Psycho. Like, you know what I mean? Where it's just like visually it just has impact. Like you're not going to forget this stuff. And like when somebody mentions Ito to me, I'm going to think about the nails in the cheek. Like, you know what I mean? Like that's the first thing I'm going to think of. I don't even know what Junji Ito looks like. I'm going to think of this.
Yep.
I don't even know what he looks like.
Actually, I do know what he looks like. But the first thing I'm going to think of is like freaking Soichi turning around, pretending to cry because he's got nails like protruding from his cheeks. Like,
Yeah, no, seriously. What about you, Ashton?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely had kind of a similar reaction to Troy in that, like, honestly, I didn't even need to get to the stopping point. Just like a couple pages in, like the first story, I definitely had that moment of, yeah, I get it. Like, I completely understand why everyone says he's a master and why he's so heavily recommended. And it doesn't even take a lot of pages to realize like how competent he is at his art form and that he's a virtuoso of this. And I kind of went into it with like trying to figure out like where the shock factor was going to be, because I knew like there was going to be some body horror, but it's also a teen plus rated book. So it wasn't going to be overly gory. So I was kind of trying to anticipate like, how is that horror going to shake out and how are you going to get that reaction without being overtly gory about it. And he landed that perfectly. And I could not have been happier because I personally, like, I know you like slashers and stuff, Troy, but I think body horror is kind of a cheap shot. Like, you can scare anybody that way. So for him to get under my skin and to be as unsettling as he was without really going all the way there,
Yeah.
like makes him incredible, makes him a master, like makes him far and beyond earn every single title he's ever been given.
Yeah, it's that like idea of now when we have like horror movies, it's all like hack and slash and blood everywhere, and it's like ultra violent, and yet this was like so subtly violent in a way.
Yeah.
It just kind of crept up on you a little bit. This was a lot, but it has inspired me to read way more of his works because I can't get enough of this. Like I've never read a comic that actually like almost traumatizes me. But just and I don't know why I want more of it.
Right. No, I mean it's I mean I do like slashers, but like I do really the stuff that really sticks out to me is terror. Like, you know what I mean?
Yes.
And so to me, something like The Exorcist is terror. Like,
Right.
And yeah, I just see that all over Ito's work. And just like you, Ashton, like the first couple of pages, like the minute they said he sucks on nails because he says low iron, I was like, I don't even know if that makes sense, but I immediately got the appeal and brilliance of Ito. I was like, as far as explanations go, that's a great explanation to just get us to where we need to go. Like, you know? So yeah, I just immediately got it just off the bat.
Are y'all inspired to read more of his works now?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. I think this is one of those ones that will just anyone. But also because of this, what are some of like the suggested things that you would, suggest to other people?
I'll say so another book that has been suggested to me that I'm going to say that I plan to read, right? After reading this, because it made me more curious about this other book, is a book called Drifting Classroom. It was something that was told I should read. I was told I should read this years ago. I actually got the copy and never read it. And so it's kind of mostly a proximity thing where it's like, okay, when I'm done with this, I can literally go over here and pick this up and start reading this to kind of see the different approaches to the horror genre that you can get in manga, because I haven't read a lot of horror manga, so I'm gonna give that a shot. And the other thing, I'll wait till Ashton gives her recommendation.
Okay, well I have two, so
go for it. You always have to.
Got a lot to say. The first one, similar. Do you say Archie?
Oh, I said overachiever.
Oh, I thought you said Archie. He's like, I do have an Archie recommendation. I do.
Okay.
Which I'll get to in a minute, because my first one is similar to what Troy said, which is a book that I feel inspired to read having read this, which is A Walk Through Hell. It's not manga, but it is horror comics, and I don't have a lot of experience in horror comics, but I know that it is highly recommended. I know it's really popular, and it's been on my bookshelf for over a year, and I'm like, I'm going to get to it. And now I feel like I have to, because I just got a taste of how good horror can be in the comic book genre. And then my second one is an Archie recommendation. I will literally recommend this book until the day I die, which is Jughead the Hunger. Not because there's a ton of overarching themes and it's not manga either, but for the simple fact of that is one of the only other books that I've endlessly had moments of, I'm sorry, what just happened? Like, wait, what? Like endlessly just like things coming out of left field that you're like, that made no sense, but I'm going to roll with it. So similar in that way. I don't know. Did anybody else watch? So in anticipation of this episode, actually, first of all, we did an episode about A Walk Through Hell. We read the entire book. So definitely check that out. But also, in anticipation of this episode, I ended up watching the Junji Ito Maniac, The Tales of the Macabre on Netflix. And I didn't watch the whole thing, but I did watch the Four Walls episode, which is actually the Soichi episode. And so I would say, like, give it a shot if you just kind of want to, especially with Halloween coming up, you can just have it on the background, kind of like I did, and just kind of watch the different avenues that Ito provides for horror. I will say, this is kind of the curse sometimes of seeing adaptations, right? Not the voice I had in my head for Soichi, and so that was a little off-putting for a second, but at the same time it's still interesting to watch. And also, of course, the artwork's not actually by Ito, so it's a little bit different in that respect. But I would say, yeah, give it a shot, check it out. I'm definitely going to watch the rest of them after this.
Yeah, there's so many great like stories that Junji Ito has, and the fact that like Netflix made this, show where we can actually see his works live, is spectacular. But I still feel like the book is much scarier.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Like
I'll agree
I
with that.
watched the Netflix, and it was just it was great. It was good stories, but there's
Yeah.
something about like the black and white and like the story and the pace that you can kind of set yourself that super creepy.
Yeah, I kind of wish that the anime had dedicated itself to being like drawn in the style of Ito. Like, you know what I mean? They kind of don't really do that. At least the one episode I watched. So we'll see. I'll watch some more.
Well, my recommendation will be Uzumaki. It is Ito's book about spirals and the craziness of an obsession of spirals, and that book has permanently freaked me out.
Mm.
If you have claustrophobia, prepare yourself.
Okay.
But it's really a mind twist, which is what I love about it.
No, actually, you just made me think of something in terms of the claustrophobia, but also it's just the design of the panels. Like the panel design is really tight. I don't think there's a lot of splash pages in this book. Like, you know what I mean? It's a lot of boxes. And I think I think the only splash page is the opening chapter graphic that accompanies every story. But like, they're very pristine, very sharp boxes that these panels are in. There's not a lot of he doesn't break the panel, like characters don't come outside of the panel, they're in the panel. And I think that's very deliberate too.
Oh, didn't even
That's
think
a
about
really great observation.
Yeah, I just feel like he's thought of every aspect in order to make it have this feeling that he's wanting you to get. And it's just, he's so good at it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh, I'm glad I got to read this book with y'all.
Yeah. I remember this was at the top of your list of like stuff you wanted to read this season. So
Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
he is the king of horror, and now y'all have experienced that, and I'm glad that you guys are hooked.
I actually am happy to hear that you recommended Uzumaki because it was on, like we were doing a March Madness style bracket on the Halloween Comic Fest page, which if you want to vote for your favorite horror comic, you can go do that there. But one of the books in there was Uzumaki, and it got a lot of votes. Everyone was really excited to see it in there. They were like, this is one of the best horror books I've ever read. So I kind of was thinking like, okay, maybe I'll need to try my hand at that since I'm reading Junji Ito right now. Maybe I can add it to the list. And now that it comes highly recommended by somebody I know and whose recommendations I trust, I feel like I have to.
Yes. One of us. But I just feel like if you like horror, you can't not like Junji Ito's work. It's just like you said, Troy. It's classic. It's like it's meant to be around forever. And so, on that note, I am going to say that this is your reminder to definitely pick up Soichi at your friendly local comic shop. And if you want to find a local comic shop near you, head on over to comicshoplocator.com. And do we have any plugs from y'all? Maybe Ashton, something from Halloween Horror?
Yeah, so I got two plugs actually. The first one is Halloween Comic Fest has been going on all month long, celebrating the best in horror comics. So we're getting ready to wrap up here shortly, but we are voting on what we think is the best horror comic, and it's come down to some heavy hitters: Harrow County, Hellboy, Tales from the Crypt, a couple other big ones. So keep an eye on the Halloween Comic Fest social media pages if you want to vote for your favorite horror comic, the best in horror comics. And then secondly, if you want to come hang out with me all year long, you can find me at Free Comic Book Day on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And next month, November, we'll be announcing the lineup of the Free Comic Book Day books for Free Comic Book Day 2024. So you're definitely going to want to be around for that.
Exciting.
I'm gonna do a list of shout outs. How about that? You can follow me at TJA Comics. That's pretty much on every platform, right? And I did a horror comic. It's coming out next year, and I can't talk about it yet. But yeah, keep an eye out for it. It'll be on my website, which is rexco-comics.com. And of course, you can find me over at Previews World. My face isn't on at Previews World every single week, but chances are you're probably talking to me. And we're going to be shifting our video content in the future. So yeah, there'll be a little bit more of me, a little bit more Natasha, some guest appearances by Ash, and of course, Anemia, brought to you by the panel. So definitely check that out.
Well, thanks for joining me, you guys. It's been too long, and I'm so glad that I got to see you and also talk about comics with you, because definitely been too long. So I really appreciate you both being here. Thank you for talking scary stuff with me.
Any day.
Yay. And thank everyone else for watching. I hope that you have gotten a great look at Junji Ito and that you are inspired to read it. If you have a graphic novel that you'd like us to talk about on the show, leave a comment below and your choice could be picked up for a future episode. This is also your reminder to follow us at Previews World and Free Comic Book Day on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube, because you don't want to miss anything that's coming up, especially with those Free Comic Book Day announcements. And outside of that, this is my chance to say that heroes are a dime a dozen, but comic fans are priceless. And we'll see you next time.